Alright, so I played a game recently called Coffee Talk 2. So this one is a bit of a non-game, which is why I don't know if it's actually a recommendation. However, Coffee Talk exudes this chill atmosphere which makes me feel relaxed and cozy. It's just something that I can appreciate regardless. Same as the first game actually. Besides, there is also a bit of a drink trivia. Both teas and coffee, as well as a few others actually. So one thing I'd say before anything else is what I'm talking about the second game, of course, but this applies to both of them. They are done the same way, and I'd suggest playing through the first one and not jumping straight into 2. There are stories which start there, and there's a lot more satisfaction in knowing what happens first before seeing where it ends up in the second Coffee Talk. However, if the first game isn't your cup of tea, then, well, 2 isn't going to change that. What is it about? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always happy you arrived. You desire presents localized to similar worries. We covet a place occupied by individuals aware of our designation, and we are afraid of copyright strikes. What did I like? The usual suspects, graphics, characters, backstories, but that's a boring answer I always use. So I'll instead point out the world, because it reminds me of Shadowrun, and there, it's definitely not a happy world. Coffee Talk is a lot more lighthearted, but strangely enough, despite the mood of the game, the world is actually a pretty grim place. Sure, there's a movement in the background, for equal rights, for everyone's happiness, good stuff, nothing violent, but then you've got newspaper headlines about the algae infestation possibly threatening all life on Earth, possibly going to consume everything. Constant arrests, people getting into scandals, all sorts of things. There are always little tidbits dropped here and there about how this world works. It's populated with these fantastical races, and you've got the more, frankly, boring ones like elves, orcs, or werewolves. But also more unique ones like fairies, mer people, whatever Aqua is. She always makes slurping tentacle sounds whenever coming or going. And now with Coffee Talk 2 there's a new Banshee character. Every single race is unique, although all of them are obviously human with a particular quirk. Like Werewolf 1 goes into berserk state once in a while, and at Coffee Talk 2 needed a special tea to calm down. Vampire character frequently talks about their troubles and how they've been around for so long but their friends are now all dead. Or Banshee talking about how when her kind dies she doesn't even leave anything behind and just vanishes. And how she used to live, because Banshees weren't recognized as a race and were treated as little more than criminals. Yet, in the middle of it all, this little cozy coffee shop, letting people come in, get drinks, and talk about their day-to-day lives. Honestly inspires me to write something myself. All the fantasy stories always just have these different races, but they always ignore the actual differences. Instead, it's just, this is humans, but they have horns. This is humans, but they have scales, and whatever else. But there's so much to tell about the little quirks. What about molting for scaled races? What about different colored coats depending on the time of year for races of fur? Or some traditions based on a particular physiological trait? That's what adds so much depth to the world and the story. So, I like the world. What did I dislike? The writing itself. And this isn't meant to say that it's awful and just shouldn't be read by anyone anywhere, but I would have to mention that it's very stale. Every character essentially talks the same way. I like to play a little game when it comes to writing. Cover up a name and see if you can figure out who said what. It's impossible in this game, because everyone talks the same. Not everyone is... Okay, it sounded like there was a kettle outside burning up. Anyway, yeah. It's impossible in games, because everyone talks the same. Not everyone in the real world uses Miss and Mister before the name. Nicknames exist. Accents, dialects, whatever parts of a language used, even downright offensive things are sometimes said by the people in a friendly company. Yet Coffee Talk writing is always very bland and, like I said, stale. Very little personality. And I will spoil something here, but I don't believe it's a big deal. The main character, the barista and the owner of Coffee Talk shop, they are an alien, and for them, that way of speaking makes sense. They are there to observe humanity, or human-like species, entity, whatever you want to call it, and it fits. However, not for patrons. I expect the orc chick to be a bit more crass and rude. I'd like Elf to sound more haughty and stuck up. I'd like Banshee to say something weird and creepy. There's much more personality to add to every single line being said, yet very little is actually there. They have their own stories, which are interesting, but they don't really sound like individual characters. It's almost as if the story is told through the alien's eyes, and it's how they perceive it, which makes it all sound unnatural. And I can't tell if that's actually a smart decision or an oversight, and I am completely overthinking it. And I believe that is pretty much the only flaw. A fairly major one. After all, there isn't really much of a gameplay here. So if I'm okay with the quote-unquote gameplay, then this is the only thing I can criticize. Now, I might be just misremembering, but there is another game very similar to this one, called Valhalla, spelled with ASCII or whatever you want to call it. Impossible to write that damn name correctly. It's also about making drinks once in a while, but mostly about listening to people's troubles. In there, I actually saw a difference in characters a lot more. There is a lot more personality to people and to their actions, although the overall story, in my opinion, is a bit more boring. And there is very little of the world shown. So you win some, you lose some. That game I definitely recommend, and I saw it discounted a few times as well. And I believe it's a stronger title than Coffee Talk, mostly. So it's a little weird to recommend another game and actually bash the one I'm making a video about. But yeah, here we are.